Seol shifted his gaze to the palm of his left hand, and in the center there was a small, circular mark, emitting a golden light. Although it quickly faded, Seol was still captivated by the sight. After that, an envelope struck his chest, and upon seeing its luxurious design, Seol guessed it was an invitation. She told him, "The gate will open at 10:30 p.m., about 2 hours from now, so take care of your personal matters. As for that message, I really don't care whether you read it or not." She glared at him fiercely once more. "If you die after everything I've done, I will reclaim every debt you owe me, even if I have to chase you to the ends of the earth. Do you understand?" Kim Hana suddenly turned on her heels, ready to leave. Just after she took a few steps away, she stopped and turned back, saying, "I also need to return this to you." She gave him the money he thought he had lost, saying, "Next time don't fall asleep anywhere, you might end up freezing to death." Seol glanced at his phone. Time had already passed, and it was approaching 10 o'clock. He said, "I don't have much time left." In any case, there wasn't much he could do with the remaining time, and he hadn't been told to prepare anything either. At that moment, he remembered Yi. Seol went to the cafe to apologize to Yi, and gruffly Yi said, "You really plan to stay like this until the end, don't you? It hasn't even been a day since you got the money." Before Seol could say anything, she pushed them back and said, "Get out of here. Leave before I call the police to disturb you while we're working." Seol grabbed Yu's wrist. He said to her, "Calm down and listen to me." She pulled her hands away forcefully and said, "I have nothing left to say to you anymore. It's better if you go, since I'm saying this kindly now." And then she entered the staff room. While the staff were blocking the door, Seol said to himself, "I guess this is what was expected." Seol turned his gaze to the clock, which indeed indicated the approaching known time. He sighed and said to the staff, "Please give this to her when she leaves." Seol exited the cafe and said to himself, "I think she said the gate opens at 10:30. Seol noticed something strange from one of the alleys and hurried over there. Yu came out of the staff room and asked, "Has he left?" Her friend replied, "Yes, but he left this." Seol was standing in one of the dark alleys, looking at his phone and saying, "Should I leave her a message?" Yu rushed out of the cafe, turning her head left and right, then noticed cigarette smoke coming from an alley behind the cafe. During that time, a circular light appeared above Seol, and the light swallowed him before disappearing, causing him to drop his phone and cigarette. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. When Yu arrived at the place, she couldn't see anything but the isolated darkness quietly hovering over the empty corridor, and she also found Seol's phone, that had fallen after being pulled by the magical circle. Seol opened his eyes. He felt somewhat strange. He glanced around, but no matter how many times he looked, this place was still his rented apartment. When he hurriedly looked out his window, there was something unnatural about the streets. He could simply say that he hadn't seen a single person, or even a moving car. Suddenly, just as his phone began to vibrate, a message arrived from the guide. "We advise all contracted and invited guests to confirm their stimulus information." When Seol realized this, he practically flew towards the phone and picked it up. An automated voice came from the device. Then the screen lit up. He quickly pressed the message icon in the corner, and a message appeared on the screen saying, "You must reach Paradise High School before the remaining time of 45 minutes expires." The content was simple, but the sender had always sent a picture that turned out to be a map. He took a look and found that his location was not far from his destination. Finding his way was extremely easy. He simply followed the directions on the map, and it took him only 2 minutes to reach his destination. There was a prominent sign hanging next to the front gate that read, "Paradise High School." Seol said, "Does this mean that Paradise is this high school?" It was emptier than in his dream. It was also strange that there was no one on the road. Seol quickly passed through the gate. He climbed the stairs, then suddenly stopped. There was an unexpected person standing at the entrance of the hall. To be more specific, it was a blonde woman in a full, formal outfit, waving her hands gently towards Seol as if to say, "Hello, sir. Please come here." Seol ignored her, thinking she was a foreigner. But when he tried to pass by her, she hurried in front of him and blocked his way, then stared at him. After that, she extended her hand. While Seol tilted his head in confusion, the blonde woman moved her lips without making a sound, then used her index and thumb fingers to form a rectangle before extending her hand again, as if to say he should hand her something. Unfortunately, Seol just stood there, his eyes blinking in bewilderment. And Seol wondered aloud, "I think she wants to check my invitation." While he was standing there wondering what to do, someone shouted from inside the hall, "They want your contract, show it." When Seol looked towards the source of the sound, he saw a young man sitting on a chair inside the hall, laughing, and in a mocking tone he said, "The scum ends up here, for being so rude." Finally, Seol took the invitation letter out of his pocket and handed it to her. The blonde woman received the invitation letter and opened it, her expression freezing. Then she brought both hands together in front of her chest and slowly bent down in an arc. It was an elegant greeting. Suddenly, the entire meeting hall fell silent, with all the attention of those who had arrived before Seol focused on the latest newcomer. Ignoring all those people, the blonde headed towards the right side of the hall and guided the anxious Seol, who was becoming more confused. She directed him to an empty chair, and then politely bowed again before smoothly stepping back. She didn't say a word, but her attitude towards him had certainly changed. Then they wondered, what was wrong with her? Why was she acting like this all of a sudden? Seol questioned why she hadn't done this when I appeared. The crowd's eyes turned to the newcomer Seol, but all he felt at that moment was confusion and bewilderment. Seol then wondered, who are these people? Although he had come here in that strange dream, this was his actual first time, and some things were progressing somewhat differently compared to the dream. The number of people gathered in the hall was more than 30. It was particularly noticeable that they were divided into a left and right side. Suddenly, a voice came from the front of the hall. On the stage, there was a man wearing a formal suit. Everyone present was surprised because there had been no one standing there just a second ago. He said, "Hello, my name is Han, and I have been assigned to guide all of you this time. You can call me the guide." Silence continued in the meeting room. Then the guide said, "I'm sure you're curious about many things, but let's stick to the agenda. Everyone present here, please think about showing your status window, or simply shout the word status in your mind, and you can say it out loud as well. Unless there is a clear indication for it, don't worry about that. Status window? Status?" At the moment, Seol thought about this in the empty air before his eyes. Suddenly many texts appeared. The status window appeared for everyone who thought about it. Then one of the attendees asked, "What is an innate skill? What do you have? Do you have an innate ability?" The one who answered was the guide Han. He hadn't expected his words to be heard from that dimension, so he felt confused while shaking his head in denial. "No, I don't have one. I was just curious." Well, it's normal not to have an innate ability. That's the case for most humans. You don't need to worry about that section of your status window. Seol continued to stare intently at his status window. The guide had certainly said it was normal not to have any innate abilities, but the window before Seol's eyes showed that he had two innate skills. A future vision? He doubted it was somehow connected to his previous dream. And those question marks. Then Seol said, "There's no reason to reveal my cards," and fell silent. The guide said, "Since we don't have much time left, I will move directly to the next step in the procedures. Please activate your marks this time. It's just like before. You can activate them by thinking or saying it out loud." The crowd was confused. Then a girl shouted, "Level mark activation." The mark appeared above her head. The others activated theirs as well. The guide said, "You all have bronze ranks." He then threw 5 invitation letters into the air. Suddenly, the papers shone before transforming into 5 bronze bags that fell to the ground. Everything was like a magic trick. He said, "Only those with bronze ranks will receive 1 random bag as a sign of the ordinary level. There could also be an invited mark, but it seems none of you received it. It would be wise to use the reward as soon as you receive it. Since the educational event will start soon, wouldn't it be unfortunate to die before you get a chance to use it?" The blonde maid picked up the 5 bags and handed each one to its owner. The guide's eyes always maintained a level of indifference, but a small glimmer of surprise flickered in his pupils now. He said, "We have 2 silver ranks. I sincerely look forward to guiding all of you." Kang Sok shouted enthusiastically, "I'm ready!" As for the girl wearing the headscarf, Yoon Seora, she shook her head once. This time, the invitation letters turned into 2 bags, and when they fell to the ground, their color was silver instead of bronze. The blonde maid moved to pick them up, while the guide's gaze fell on Seol, who was staring blankly at the air in front of him. He said, "Please activate your level mark." Seol was very busy with the issue of innate abilities, but when the sound resonated powerfully within his eardrums, he quickly emerged from his stupor. The guide then repeated the question, "Show your mark level." The guide suddenly halted his words and stared intently. His eyes widened as he gazed at Seol, or to be more specific, at the exposed rank of Seol. The guide was astonished and said to himself, "A golden mark, I have heard of it before. It is indeed the first time I have seen it. Throughout history, there has been only one person who bore the golden mark." Han coughed and cleared his throat before shifting his gaze to the invitation letter remaining in his hand. He became excessively cautious as he slowly revealed the invitation letter and then read its contents from top to bottom without leaving anything out, saying, "An important guest is present here." He spoke calmly, but his voice sounded loud due to the deadly silence that enveloped the place, and dozens of eyes focused on one person. Seol immediately felt embarrassed at that moment. Afterwards, he lightly tossed the invitation letter before it transformed into a magnificent golden bag. The blonde maid moved forward and handed him the bag. The guide said, "Please open your rewards. It is essential." When Seol opened the bag, 3 rewards appeared before him: 5,000 survival points, 1 survival badge, and 1 unknown student diary. There were also 3 small boxes in the bag. The mobile phone lit up and vibrated in his pocket, but Seol did not feel it, as his attention was focused on the 3 boxes that were carefully placed in the bag. The guide said, "There should be 3 boxes. You can open them." Zensul cautiously opened the first box. A system message appeared, saying, "Your innate skill has responded. The foresight to awaken a new ability. The innate skill has evolved into the skill, the 9 eyes. The central direction of your innate skill, the 9 eyes, has been opened." Green, general observation. Seol wondered aloud. Green? General observation. Upon hearing a notification that he needed to check his status window, Seol raised his head, which made him look toward the status window of Yoon Seora. This allowed him to see her status window. From Seol's perspective, the whole thing seemed ridiculous, and he said, "Didn't Han say that you can't view someone's status window without the owner's permission?" Seol quickly opened the remaining 2 boxes at the same time. His innate skill, the 9 eyes, evolved once again. Then, the left directions for the innate skill, the 9 eyes, were opened. Yellow, attention required; orange, do not approach; and red, immediate retreat recommended. He also received a charm paper. Seol couldn't see this charm at the moment. For some inexplicable reason, Seol recalled something from his distant past, something he had almost forgotten. The whispers of a woman whose face he couldn't even remember, saying, "You have beautiful eyes. They are truly beautiful, possessing 7 colors like a rainbow." While Seol was lost in his thoughts, Han spoke up. "Have you opened all your boxes?" Seol replied, "Yes." The guide thought to himself, his expression showing dissatisfaction. For other people, the main box will provide them with incredible benefits, but it might cause some problems. He doesn't care about balance or anything else. "But if this is the case, I will use my authority as their guide." Here, Han referred to the person who had given Seol a special invitation. Then Seol said, "A message appeared, saying I should check my status." The hint of dissatisfaction disappeared from Han's face, and he thought to himself, "It must be that his current ability has improved. If that's the case, I can let it pass." The guide smiled brightly and exclaimed, "Good! Now that all the rewards have been opened, shall we begin?" As they were about to begin, a young woman stood up and said, "Wait a moment." Han replied, "What's the matter? We were about to start." A hint of dissatisfaction appeared on the woman's face as she said, "Aren't we also getting the bags?" He responded, "No, you won't be getting them. The rewards are only for the invited guests." The young woman replied, "Aren't we also invited?" The guide let out a suppressed sarcastic laugh before immediately answering her, "That's simple. These guests were invited after a strict evaluation." After that, Han pointed his finger and said, somewhat accusatorily, "And you people were dragged here because of your contracts. Moreover, didn't you, Miss Shin, receive ample compensation in your real lives?" Upon hearing this question, the woman with the short haircut, Shin, was left speechless. Her face flushed, but that was not the end. A man from the group of contractors stood up in indignation and said, "Contract or not, you need to explain that better. What's the reason for gathering us here?" A few people here and there began to agree with the unknown man. After all, since the guide's appearance, he had only paid attention to the left side of the hall, where the invited guests were. But unfortunately for them, this was not the right place to express their dissatisfaction, and Han was not the right person to complain to. Han smiled sarcastically as he looked at them and said, "You will find out for yourself. It's too late to act." The unknown man flinched and asked, "What?" The guide smiled and then pressed an icon on his phone. All those present received a message that read, "You have received a message from the guide. You have received a message from the guide. This mission of the tutorial program will now begin. The notes of an unknown student have been updated." Han placed his right hand over his chest and then bowed politely, saying, "I wish you all an exciting school year. Good luck." Han disappeared, just as he had when he first appeared. Not only him, but the blonde maid also vanished. Now that they had been left abandoned, people began to stand up in a hurry. After the guide and the maid disappeared, they received another message: "Escape from the gathering hall and reach the waiting area on the 2nd floor of the main school building before time runs out." A loud crash shook the exit door. Of course, Seol did not remain in place when this chaos erupted. He grabbed the empty golden bag, slung it over his shoulder, and then rose from his chair, all the while keeping his eyes on the door. The door no longer glowed green, but instead shone orange. It seemed that the door was about to break due to the continuous impacts. One of the door's hinges could not withstand the force and detached from the wall, falling to the ground with a sharp metallic clang. The silence that followed the confusion was deafening. Their lives were noticeably threatened. Jin was the first to grab her chair and then ran toward the door, followed by dozens of bodies rushing toward it. The sound of the repeated pounding on the door carried a certain amount of rage, and the resulting force sent 4 or 5 men flying as if they weighed nothing. Despite the fact that this wouldn't block the door for long, it was better than nothing. Seol was focused on his phone, as he had received 2 other messages, in addition to the guide's message. Coincidentally, one of them was related to the matter of the diary of an unknown student, which was referred to as the reward clause. The message read, "There was one door for entering and exiting the gathering hall. We managed to block it somehow, but at the same time we blocked our only escape route. The door we desperately sealed has become useless. In the midst of this chaos I was able to discover a loophole. After a while, the noise from outside disappeared. The crowd asked, 'Is it over?' Jihoo Seol stood with her back against the door and then fell to the ground. One of the guests said, 'It's just the beginning. Moreover, they are not messing around.' I felt a chill run down my arms." Kang was busy rubbing his arm while saying those words, then continued, "Let's search this place." The middle-aged man said, "Hey you, what's your plan?" Seok replied, "To check." Seok pointed towards the platform where Yunsiara was. The man asked, "What are you looking for?" Seok responded, "I'm not really sure, but since the exit is blocked now, I think we should find something, right? Since we don't know what will happen next anyway." The middle-aged man nodded enthusiastically and said, "Yes, you're right. We should help you too, shouldn't we?" Kang Seok frowned slightly and said, "Why you? Do what you want, sir. I'm not here to command others. I'm not here to do gestures." The middle-aged man ignored his hostile tone and continued to plead. Kang Seok rejected the middle-aged man's offer without hesitation and turned to leave, while the man shouted, "Hey, wait a moment, young man." But Seok didn't bother and continued walking away. What a pathetic scoundrel. Seok's steps suddenly stopped as he stared at the ceiling for a moment or two, then took a deep breath before turning his head to look at the source of the voice. He found a woman glaring at him with venomous eyes. It was Shin, and she said, "You're a selfish scoundrel. You only care about yourself. While we're in this situation." Shin shouted at him angrily, "Did you not see all these people here? There's even a mother and her child." Silence fell in the hall. Then Seok smiled sarcastically and said, "I already have a lot on my plate, so what do you want from me?" Shin replied, "That's why we offered our help." Seok sighed and said, "Help? Why are you throwing all your burdens on me? You're nothing more than a heavy load. Even a blind fool can see you're trying to cling to us, so get out of my face." Shin was struck with shock and anger. Just when the tense situation was about to spiral out of control, a girl hurriedly jumped between the two parties and intervened. It was none other than Seol. "Please, both of you stop. We need all the help we can get, not a fight." Kang Seok smiled insincerely and then extended his hand to Seol, saying, "Why don't you join us? I'll take him under my wing as well," she asked. "Why are you willing to let us work alongside your group?" He replied, "You two would be very useful to us." Shin angrily said, "How can you know if they will be useful to you or not?" Seok smiled insincerely and said, "It's simple, because these two are invited. As for you guys, you were pulled in by your contracts." Seok turned his head towards Seol and said, "Hey man, what about you? Don't you want to finish this stupid tutorial as soon as possible? I'm sure we could wrap it up quickly if you joined us." Although the whole situation had turned into a strange farce, it ultimately didn't matter. For now, even a fool could recognize Seol's unknown value. After all, even the guide couldn't speak lightly to him. In other words, He was a special person. Even Seol was saying to herself, "Please, help these people. Don't abandon them. Please." Seol couldn't help but feel trapped under a rock in a tough spot while being singled out like this. Perhaps it was no surprise that Seol's instincts kicked in when faced with such a situation, and then the entire gathering hall was painted with a range of colors. The color of the blocked exit changed from orange to green, and now Kangshuk was glowing orange, while at the same time there was no color on Seol. However, at that moment, Seol was not in a position to care about these color changes. Because the entire floor was stained with a deep shade of red, he felt as if he was looking at a sea of blood. A warning for immediate retreat.